Such a joy to have Heidi here, and we have Sarah Johnson to thank for this. Sarah gave me a call or emailed me and said I thought that Heidi might be someone that we might all like to hear from. And Dr. Heidi Steltzer is a science mystic who's been studying high mountains and the Arctic for over 30 years. She served as lead author on the High Mountain chapter of the 2019 IPCC Special Report on Oceans and Cryosphere in a Changing Climate, and as Professor of Environment and Sustainability at Fort Lewis College in Durango. She was there for 15 years. Most recently, Heidi's completed a Master's of Divinity at Iliff School of Theology in Denver, and founded her own thing, the Center for Earth Theology in Cortez, Colorado. Will you please welcome Heidi Steltzer?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. It is wonderful to be here with you today and to meet people on the other side of the Elk Mountains. I was 21 years old in 1993 when I first came to these mountains for a summer of research. I'm 53 now, and I've been studying the planet, learning her ways ever since, mostly here in Colorado, and most often on mountain hillsides. I'd like to share a couple stories with you today. One of that summer in 1993, here in the Elks, and one in 2003 in Greenland. These stories are about what is possible. They are about being guided by the earth and the divine. They are about reorienting myself to learn that neither space nor time are what I thought they were. They invite us into relationship. I want to know you all and be known by you. We are part of the earth and part of the divine. The earth and the divine are a part of us. We are let's do that one again. I've learned to trust what I've lived more than what I've studied, read, or been told. It frees me from the constraints of this era, of space and time, of systems, of institutions, in the ways they have or have not centered me, and how being centered can blind us. Science made sense as a way to make a living in this era and to live into knowing the earth. But there's so much more that's possible through science, faith, and mysticism, by including what can't be seen or measured. There just aren't many jobs to do that, but perhaps there could be. That summer here in the Elks in 1993, I lived at 9,500 feet elevation, and I was doing research at 11,000 feet. For work each day, I'd ride in a Land Cruiser, post hole across a snowfield at Schofield Pass, cross the Crystal River in my brand new Aqua Geckos that I bought at Gene Taylor's in Gunnison, and hike up Mount Galena to the Nature Conservancy's Mexican Cut Nature Preserve. I'm name dropping, can you tell? I expect many of you know these places and that brand of sandals before it became Chacos. I was studying the behavior of insects in high-altitude ponds that don't last all summer when there isn't a lot of snow. Are they willing to eat their family and friends? So they can mature and then transform from pond creatures to creatures of flight and reproduce before the water is gone. I was studying cannibalism. But I wasn't just doing research. I was never just doing research. God had other plans for me which I want to acknowledge is a loaded thing to say. But it packages the sentiment in a more familiar way to many. I wanted to know the earth, and the earth wanted me to know her. It was always a two-way invitation of gifting and receiving gifts, similar to what we've already been speaking of today. The earth wants all of us to know her. Perhaps it's time for more of us to know how. Here in the Elks, without awareness of it, having read nothing of this and having decided at the age of 19 to stop going to church, I was exploring what shows up when the veil is thin. The veil that separates the reality we know, World 48, as some have named it, from the imaginal world in World 24, and the worlds beyond that. There's a richness of these otherworldly explorations in this valley. So I mention them as World 48 and World 24 because I expect that those words, that languaging, is familiar to some of you, though I don't often name them this way. Instead, I often talk about the impossible being possible, of being guided, of knowing without knowing why you know, of instinct, of God, the divine or presence, of an energy that is the light. I'm reluctant to settle on any one word for this experience of presence, and decided in December they all failed at conveying what I've been experiencing. I asked the professor with whom I took Hebrew Bible and ecology, her name is Dr. Amy Erickson, what her PhD advisor Walter Brueggemann did. What word did he choose? And she said Yahweh. She explained the Hebrew, which I'm not going to be able to do a good job of here, but there's many people in the valley who can do that. Yahweh being I am, beingness, being. And in January, I was listening to John O'Donohue in the interview he did with Krista Tippett in 2008, just before he died at the age of 52. I was listening for the second time, having not heard of him before. I mention this to highlight that we can live into the same insights, ideas, and wisdom arising through many of us, independent of one another, and that I have lived separate from spiritual teachers, books, and practices for over 30 years of science. That is, I didn't read books by authors like O'Donohue. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't read any written scripture in the way we would think about it. What O'Donohue offered, in the podcast, and this is beautiful, he said, and I suppose the question that's at the heart of all we've been discussing, really, which is a beautiful question, is the question of God. And I think that one of the reasons so many people turn away from religion in our times is that the God question has died for them, because the question has been framed in such repetitive, dead language. And I think it's exciting, the question, once you awaken to the presence of God, which he follows by quoting a phrase of St. Augustine's, God is more intimate to me than I am to myself. I have spent my life getting to know me. Who am I? Am I? With the earth as my guide, God, mystery as partner, co-conspirator too. One day in the summer of 1993, I decided to sleep at the field site on my own, having never camped on my own before, having only begun to learn to camp a few years before. I wanted to know if the insects we were studying behaved differently at night. They didn't, but I did. What I noticed at night was different than what I noticed during the day. I was noticing me, noticing the insects. I was learning and knowing myself. I was part of the study. We are part of creation, and we are the experiment. I chose to camp on my own in Hasley Basin that summer, to hike in alone, set up my tent alone, and rest in a meadow of extraordinary wildflowers alone, looking up at them. There was a universe above my head. Bees and flies and butterflies and hummingbirds in constant motion, settling only briefly on the flowers that were huge. The flowers filled the sky. Orientation matters when we observe and receive. As a scientist, I've sat for hours in meadows, knelt for hours, and laid down on my belly. Yep, for hours. I've dug holes, walked off trail, and repaired the vole-eaten wires of microclimate sensors for hours. This has been my orientation in relation to the meadows here in Colorado and elsewhere. I was in a Colorado meadow at 9,500 feet in the summer of 2016 in the longest-running warming experiment in the world. The voles had eaten the wires of our sensors, so my field assistant and I sat in the meadow 4 hours fixing them. It was a hot summer without much rain. We were soldering wires and wrapping them, which is boring to do all day. So I kept looking at the plants that by 1 p.m. in the heat and sun of a mid-June without much rain should be wilting. Why weren't they wilting? Why weren't they browning? Why weren't they dead? They were green, and every species had a trick. Plant tricks to deal with hot temperatures and not enough water. It was awesome. And I marveled at their tricks. Fold up your leaves. Stand up straight. Both are ways to avoid absorbing the sun's energy when there's too much of it and not enough water. And there was one plant with huge leaves that didn't do anything different. A few years later, we learned this sunflower has incredibly deep roots. Deep rooting is another trick. It's a plant trick for when the environment is harsh, and it can be a people trick too. We too can root deep. We can tap into deep water that is ever present in the great river, the flow that connects us all. All right, on to Greenland. First, I'm going to offer that the Greenlanders, the folks who live in Greenland, don't call Greenland Greenland. That's a name that came from others. They call their homeland, and I'm not going to be able to say this well, but Kalalit Nonanat. Nonanat, yeah, there we go. The land of the people, which is tough for me to say, so I am going to default to Greenland for the rest of what I offer. I wanted to go to Greenland to conduct research and just to be there, to be in a landscape where the ice was huge and the land was waking from a long slumber. I wanted to meet the plants that lived there, knowing how tough an environment it is for plants to live in. I wanted to be somewhere where someone might offer me seal or whale to eat, which they did, and I did. Eat whale and seal. I wanted to explore through this word, I wanted to explore, though this word is how I would have described my choice back then. What I've come to learn more over 30 years of spending time, often alone, in cold and remote places, is that it's relationship I was seeking. Relationship with land, seas, plants, rocks, and ice. To know them and listen to their stories, told through their and my willingness to know and be known. The earth wants us to know her and be known by us. Wants to know us and be known by us. She has offered herself to us over millennia. The lessons the earth offers, we know as science and also as scripture. The earth is a source of wisdom about beauty, compassion, love, and connection. The earth teaches us that we already know these things, that these are in us, just as the earth is in us, and the divine too. What I'm doing as I'm saying this is meshing, a word I've learned as I've begun to read Tim Ingold's conceptual thinking. He's an anthropologist, a theoretical anthropologist from Britain, and he suggests that we are lines, not points, because we are in motion. We are live through our movements, through journeying, walking, running, swimming, hiking, biking, driving, boating, crawling, all the different ways that we adventure. And when we gather and engage with one another, we are forming a mesh of our emotions across space and time. I wasn't in Greenland just to conduct research. I was there to mesh with her. In the summer of 2003, there was a moment as I walked along the edge of the Greenland ice sheet when I decided to know what was under the edge of the ice. I wanted to see what the earth looked like, where the ice hadn't yet but would soon melt away. I got down on my hands and knees and dug away at the ice with my gloved hands. The ice wasn't like the ice on a pond in winter. It was like the icy crystals of snow at the bottom of the snowpack. It was like depth hoar, large sugary ice crystals. I could dig them away with my hands and move the ice aside. I exposed the earth that was underneath, earth that had likely been under ice for millennia. The ground wasn't bare. In ecology classes and textbooks, I had long been taught that glaciers scrape the ground free of all life, of all organic mineral, or of the soil that has carbon in it, of all that was there before. They reset the ground to only rock and mineral soil. But what was there was old brown moss. Instinctively, I picked up the moss. All of this was, of course, taking place by instinct. There was no scientific protocol that I was following. No one had taught me to do this or suggested it. The wind was blowing strong. The sun was shining bright. I was squishing the moss between my fingers. I'd removed my gloves so I could feel the moss, mesh with the moss, and sense its aliveness. I knew the moss was alive even after millennia under the ice. My mind raced with scientific ways to test this. What was in my backpack that I could use to put the moss in, to bring the moss back to the lab we'd set up on the U.S. Air Force Base where I was living? Where I could put the moss until we were leaving to head back to the U.S. where I had better lab facilities. How I'd need to store the moss during transit. What permits would I need to bring the moss back to the U.S. through customs? And what procedures might I need to test the moss to demonstrate the moss was alive? I started picturing the paper that I'd write and where it could get published. How underneath ancient ice there is life. And the boost this would have for my career. I wanted to succeed at being a scientist, and to do so, one of the metrics is high-impact papers. My mind raced, the wind blew, and the sun shined. And I sat thinking about what to do next. And just as I knew that the moss was alive, I knew in an instant to put the moss back. To thank the moss for what they had taught me, for their willingness to offer themselves in this lesson from the earth and the divine. Time as I knew it wasn't real. The ancient is close and relevant. Aliveness doesn't end. Life persists under ice. I returned the moss to their home and scooped the sugary ice on top. I offered my gratitude, stood up, and walked away from the wall of ice. It was time to get out of the wind. What I couldn't have imagined was real, couldn't have imagined I'd know, came not through science as we often talk about it, but through relationship with the moss, the earth, and the divine. I meshed with the moss and with Greenland. My line was in more rapid motion. Theirs was not moving much at all, but also was not still. And I had for a moment lived in parallel and connected with them. I offered the title for this message today as engaging with the earth, and then I learned of meshing. The earth wants us to mesh with her, just as the divine does. And what I'm trying to figure out as I talk about this here today and more often is if I talk about this, if others who have also lived this talk about it, if we trade stories of what has happened when you meshed with the Elk Mountains, how we can mesh in ways that culture doesn't often encourage and may often discourage, what is possible? I've been playing around with this, trusting and listening to the stories that connect us and deepen our roots into the ever present, the river that has I've been playing around with this, trusting and listening to the stories that connect us and deepen our roots into the river that always has water and hopefully also has snow and connects us all to one another. Thank you.
Do you know, I think it's so important, the work that Heidi's doing, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come here, because, you know, we have become so disconnected from the earth. In the old days, you know, we had to gather wood and farm, and, you know, it was cold, and it was hot. But gradually, we become incredibly disconnected to the point where, you know, when it's hot, you just turn on the air conditioning. When it's cold, you just turn on the heating. So we've sort of insulated ourselves. And we, you know, going to cities, we then insulate ourselves from, and we become so disconnected that, you know, our minds now think that we can do anything. You know, people say climate change doesn't exist, and, you know, all these sorts of things, and we totally disregard our relationship with the world, the earth. And the earth is there for us just to take what we can from the earth so that we can live better lives. And with that has come a disconnection. The work that Heidi's doing is the work to reconnect us. Because, you know, let's face it, we obviously are the earth. You know, we came from the earth. We were seeds, and then we've grown, and we are just bits of the earth, and we are bits of the planet. And you can see that from space, that we are flowers ourselves. And not only have we become disconnected from the earth, but we've also become disconnected from the divine. Because the, you know, dreadful things that have happened in the name of religion, a lot of people just don't want anything to do with it whatsoever. And you get to the point where we're disconnected from the earth, we're disconnected from the divine, and we're disconnected from each other. You know, we're fundamentally brains on legs, wandering around the place, deciding what we want to do with the resources we've got to make ourselves feel better. And to me, what Heidi is doing is creating that intersection between all those things, you know, our relationship with the earth, our relationship with the divine, and our relationship with each other. And she's creating that community of culture, which I think is so important. So always we have an opportunity to ask questions, share an experience, or do anything, ask Heidi a question. So I'm going to shut up now and just say, would anyone like to say something? Tom, yes, and then we'll come to Louisa after that.
Well, first, thank you so much. When you started talking about the moss, long before the end of your story, I knew you were going to put it back. I knew you were going to experience it, not scientifically study it. So I really appreciated that. I think that's kind of the essence of everything you said. I have been recently very immersed in a lot of the subject of what you've been talking about, pivoted around relationship within myself, with others, with nature, and the co-creative part of it is what's most important. That I think empowerment is recognizing that it isn't just you're not at the effect. You are engaged in creation, co-creation of the universe you experience. And Heather read something the other week or two, maybe 2 weeks ago, about primal prayer from Richard Rohr, which galvanized me because it was a catalyst, another point of view from a theological perspective that I didn't expect, that was very validating about the aliveness of connection. The engagement is enlivening when you feel dulled down by it all or offended by it all, which often I am. So it takes me out of it to recognize some of the very things you are immersed in. So thank you.
And you are immersed in. Let's trade reading lists and be in conversation.
I would love to.
Sounds amazing.
And in fact, what was the guy's name? Tim
So
something?
being alive,
Yeah.
I told a story to Amy about an essay I'd written for theology school in which I chose not to cite almost any of what we'd been assigned to read all semester because it didn't feel alive to me. And the conversations I'd been having with people is what felt alive to me. So you can look it up online. There's ways to cite whoever you meet at the farmer's market who you have an amazing conversation with. You can cite best friends. You can cite sermons. And so I just cited all of those things. And she's like, I think you need to read this book, Being Alive. And in the preface, and she hadn't remembered this, in the preface to the book, he says, and offers that scholarship is also what we receive from the earth. And when we offer scholarship, we could be citing the mountains and the rivers and the plants and the rocks and the ice too. And she had forgotten that. And I was just like, yes, wait till the next essay gets written. Higher ed is still kind of higher, it's got systems. Professors aren't always happy when you cite your friends and neighbors instead of citing the scholars that they've chosen. But not everything was meant to be written down, is what I decided.
Thank you.
Louisa, do you want to pass that to Louisa?
Hi, thank you so much. I really enjoyed what you said. And also, I had forgotten that John O'Donohue interview with Krista Tippett on being, which is so beautiful. And really, he talks about the wonder and awe of nature and God, and consciousness. So now I want to listen to it again. So thank you for that reminder. I had a question for you. I know you said you went and got your degree in theology at the ILF Institute, and now that you have developed an Earthology Institute. So I wanted to know what it is that you are doing. Are you traveling around and giving talks, or what is it that you endeavor?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So I have one more year of residency to do, which will be next year. So I have this semester in theology school, and then a year of residency as part of getting a master's in divinity degree. So that's next year. So I'm not quite done yet, but I bought land in Cortez 3-4 years ago, and I want to write a book, and I wanted a place to be within view of amazing places, Mesa Verde, the La Plata Mountains, the San Juan Mountains, and be in the desert. There's something just incredible about deserty places as much as mountains are amazing. And within a couple weeks of having the property, 2 trailer homes, a barn, a shop, and a A-frame cabin that the man who'd put all these buildings on the property, took from the mountains and put in the desert, It's on McElmo Creek on the east side of Cortez. Within a couple weeks, I knew the place wasn't just for me. So then I'm just in this like flow state of life where I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? And the first step is to make sure that the buildings are all in better repair and to code, because I don't want to get myself into a legal issue. So I've been doing that work and spending time there. And what I sometimes talk about it as I want it to be a monastery, no face and all face kind of a place, because I feel like there's an invitation into these spaces that, as Nicholas said, we've been uncertain about stepping into. It's easier for many of us to step into the planet space than the religion space for many of the reasons Nicholas spoke of. And so how do we have fewer barriers to that? I want it to be a place of spiritual teaching in which we honor each other, all of us as spiritual teachers, and that we see that there's a richness of wisdom that everyone has, rather than I think that a lot of the tradition of spiritual teaching follows this pattern that we have for a lot of things of one person at the top and a lot of us looking to and following, when I think it's so much more exciting if we're all taking turns, which is more what birds do. They all take turns.
I think we've got time for one more. Anybody, one more question? Yes, Donna. And then I'll quickly come to, Donna.
Wait till the last minute here. I just want to thank you and marvel at the coincidence of your being here and saying what you're saying. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about navigating aging and what that means, and that I'm not always moving, that I'm moving slowly and not smoothly, and I had to sort of recommit or to explore and reassure myself that that doesn't change my relationship to the earth just because I'm not on the trail. Mm-hmm. And that there are ways to do that, and that no matter what, my atoms, my matter, I'm not separate. And I'll just continue to be in relationship to the earth in whatever state my matter is. But you were sort of like okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for that.
Quickly from John, because I know it's always worth hearing from John. So here we are.
Thank you, Heidi. Could you please repeat the Hebrew saying, and could you please spell it?
Oh, Yahweh.
Yahweh.
Yahweh, just, Yahweh. And it's one of the words that we often see in biblical text that refers to God.
Thank you.
Very quickly. Yeah, go on.
I found that so fascinating, Heidi, and as I was talking to you before you made your presentation, I mentioned that I feel like I'm a pantheist and I see God everywhere in nature. And so I was a little confused because you do have some of the scientific background. So when I see the sunflower, I just can't believe how wonderful it is. And yet you've gone in, and I kind of prefer the mystery. And yet you've kind of delved in, and so you told me something I've never known, which is they have a deeper root, and that's why they survive. So does that almost reinforce your belief in the divine and the power of nature, as opposed to me, who considers it more of just more of a mystery, but incredibly beautiful?
I'll keep the answer short, but would love further conversation, David. Science, true to the process, the experience of science, this is a process, and we never know the answers. So it is all about mystery. And the way that it's often represented, that we've come to know it, that we look to scientists for answers, I'm ready to swear, but I won't. I don't know any more than any of you all do, and the magic is in community with one another and with the mystery of the natural world, absolutely. So thank you for bringing that up.